Last couple months, I have had something really placed on my heart by God, and I've really kind of developed a passion for helping people to see Shepherd of the Lakes not just as the place that you go to church, but actually as your family. And I realize how hard that can be for sometimes. Maybe you're somebody who's here for the first time and you come in here, there's so many people and it just seems overwhelming, and maybe you only know one or two people, and that seems like a very intimidating thought for you. But I can assure you that if you're patient and you get to that point where you actually see Shepherd of the Lakes as a family, it's an indispensable community, especially when you're struggling through this world, through that with that disease, that shared disease we have called sin that Pastor Miles talked about just a little while ago. And I want you to understand that if you're somebody who's new, if you haven't been to church in a while, or if you're and I know some of you here actually very much do see Shepherd of the Lakes as your family, but if you're kind of in that other category and you're struggling a little bit in that way, I want you to know that I in some ways understand. I've been here now, this is my starting my fourth year here at Shepherd of the Lakes, and there were many times during the first couple of years I was here where I would be so nervous, especially at large gatherings. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we celebrated Rally Day, okay? And this is this huge picnic that we have, this huge weekend, lots of things going on, busy at this church, lots of exciting stuff, lots of volunteers, and it's meant to be the big kickoff for our church here. And in the past, there were many times where I was super nervous because I'd come and there's so many people. I don't know everybody's name, and yet everybody knows me, and it's kind of nerve-wracking and intimidating. And if I were to say back then that, this whole community feels like a family, it would have been, maybe a little bit of a stretch because I was still getting acclimated. But I can tell you today, this is, beginning my fourth year, I look at you, and I can honestly say that I see you as my family. Rally Day 2 weeks ago, my wife can attest, that our whole family was looking forward to that weekend with all the busyness and everything it entails, because we got a chance to see so many faces that we know. I look out in the pews and I see faces that have names. It's pretty exciting, but more important than that, I see people who have their own stories. I know some of the struggles that each of you carry around with you, the different circumstances. And I also know, as I look out here, there are a lot of faces I don't know, and I know that some of you are people who are visiting or here for the first time, and that brings me to the other exciting part of being part of a family like this. It's always growing. We've had a lot of children born to family members here in recent months, and it's been a joy to see those families celebrating, bring a new child in their family. We have some little ones here baptized today. Jason Cole, if I remember correctly. Is that correct? Got it right? Good. Okay. And we brought into God's family, and for me, it's a blessing, because I walk out of worship a lot of times, and I'll have somebody walk up to me like, I'm visiting for the first time. That's a new person with a new story. I'll run into people through baptisms. A lot of times, people who have, been skirting on the outside or haven't been here before, don't see this really as your church family, and it's a joy really to get to know you and to learn a little bit more about your family and how maybe we can serve you. I meet people through our school, I meet people through Genesis and that community that I started. It's a joy to be able to share the gospel for the first time oftentimes with people. The point I'm making is that it is a joy for me to look at you and see you as a family, and my deepest desire is for you to see this community in the same way. And let me help you understand this in a little deeper way as well. When I look at you and when I look at myself in the mirror, I see God's children. You see, in a theological sense, God is my Father, okay? God is my heavenly Father, and He makes you and me His children by virtue of the fact that He sent His Son Jesus to die for us. And so what is it that unites us as God's children, as a family? What is it that brings us together? Is it because we all have similar interests? Is it because we all have the exact same struggles? No. We're united by the gospel, by the fact that we have faith in the promises of God. You see, this is what the gospel teaches you. It teaches you that it doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what kind of mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter what people say about you or your children or anybody else. It doesn't matter what's coming in from the outside, because God says you are loved. You are my child and you belong here. And that truth unites us. Isn't that awesome? And when you understand that we are united by love, by God's grace, what that does is it helps me, and it helps you to look at our Heavenly Father and understand that we can trust Him. He is a loving Father. He loved us so much, He sent His Son Jesus, so we can trust Him when He says that there are limits in this world. There's a certain design for this world, and we're called to live according to that design. Just like any family, there are limits that we place, that we encourage one another to live within in response to God's love. See, Jesus' death on the cross motivates us to look to our Heavenly Father and know and trust that what He desires for my life is good. I think this is a good opportunity for me to also acknowledge that I know that each of you are a part of other communities. All of us, we're all part of different communities. We have lots of teenagers, young people who don't go to Shepherd Lake School, okay? You go to other, Heartland, Howell, Brighton, South Lyon. We have, private schools that some of you drive your kids far out to, and so you are part of different school communities. And I even see on Facebook, you're off meeting with these other people and you know them well. It's like another family for you. Many of you have work communities that you're a part of. I suppose going back to the school community I was talking about, there's also sporting communities. Some of you travel with teams, with your kids, and you play in different places, gymnastics, dance, all these other things. And then, of course, there's that greater cultural community that we're all part of, America. Now, I want you to understand that it's a good thing that we're part of these communities. It's good. It's not bad to be part of different communities outside of this one. But I think it's important for us to be mindful of some of the influences as well. I want to use an analogy that perhaps you can relate to. Imagine a young boy living with his family. He's got parents who love him dearly, and he loves them back because it's a wonderful relationship. He lives in this house with his parents, and they have guidelines in this house, and he understands that these are good guidelines. He's never questioned them before because he knows his parents love him. Okay? But one day, a new family comes to the neighborhood. They move in next door, and so the young boy's parents say, "Hey, why don't you go visit the family next door? I hear they have a boy just your age. Why don't you go welcome him to the community?" So what does he do? He goes to the neighbor's house, introduces himself. They hit it off. They become close friends. But pretty soon, this young boy learns something about this kid next door. His family has different ways of looking at things. He's allowed to watch rated R movies. Stay out as long as he wants to in the middle of the night. He can stay up till 4 in the morning. His parents don't care, and they let him talk to them any old way he wants. What do you think that young boy, now that he's got this friendship with this other kid, what do you think he's going to do when he comes back to his parents? Why are you holding me back? There's so much more to this world than this limit that you set upon me. Why in the world have you been shutting me off to this reality? You've been shielding me from this truth. This is what Satan did to Adam and Eve. He was playing the kid next door. Adam and Eve had this wonderful order that they were living under God's care. And Satan came along. You notice he didn't say God's lying to you, just like that kid next door. He didn't say your parents are lying to you. What he said was, did God really say? Are you sure that the order, that his commands are actually for your good? There's so much more out there. And look at this fruit. It is so pleasing to the eye. Why don't you just take a bite? Well, Adam and Eve, what did it get them doing? It got them thinking. And this is what happens to all of us in our own ways, myself included. Satan comes along and he says, did God really say? Did God really say that, within that relationships, that certain parts of a relationship should be reserved for marriage, that we shouldn't just move in with one another, that there is an order for relationships and for marriage in general. Did God really say that? Because you know what? Your friends, they're doing it. It looks just fine to me. It works out. And they seem to be enjoying themselves. It's just the way things are now. You're kind of right. It looks kind of pleasing to the eye. And, did God really say that you shouldn't gossip? That you shouldn't talk about your neighbor, say hurtful things about them behind their backs? Blowing you away here. Did he actually say that you shouldn't talk about your neighbors behind their backs? Because you know what? All your friends are doing it. Looks like fun. Good times. And you know what? That person's never going to hear about it anyway, right? Yeah, just join in. You get the approval of your friends, everybody wins. Did God really say that a parent's primary job is to share their faith with their children? Because you know what? Those people over there, those other parents, they seem to be doing just fine, and you got such a busy schedule, you got so many things to do, and you know what? All you got to do is bring them every now and then, you're all good, and don't worry about talking about it at home. It'll take care of itself. Look, other people wake up, go to bed, everything works out fine for them. So did God really say that? I mean, let's think about this. Did God really say that life is not all about you? You look at that world out there. Looks like a playground to me. A lot of fun. The truth is God says all of those things. When you enjoy certain perks within a relationship outside of that promise, you see all sorts of chaos ensuing, and then we wonder why. When we start gossiping about other people and being just downright hurtful towards other people, only thinking of our own interests, what happens? We know what happens, and yet we do it anyway. What happens? What happens when we don't talk to our children about Jesus? They begin to see other things as mattering much more. And guess what? The reason why God tells us this is because there's only one who can save them. Just as there's only one who can save you, and that's Jesus. But by our actions, we teach our children otherwise. Problem that we have, that Adam and Eve didn't have, though, is that we're used to sin. We're used to it. Just look around, and what do you see? You see your relationships that are broken. I'm used to it. When you hear about another person getting divorced, maybe you experienced that yourself. We're used to hearing about these things. We're used to hearing about children being torn from their parents. We're used to hearing about broken homes. We're used to hearing about people being obnoxious to one another. We're used to people being hurtful on purpose. Because that's just the way the world is, right? We're used to pain. So why don't we just go ahead and inflict it upon one another? We're used to death. So what do we do about it? We blame everybody else. We focus on externals. You see? It's the community's fault. It's Satan's fault. You see, this is what Adam and Eve did. Satan tempted them. Did God really say? And then God said, well, who told you that you were naked? Who told you that all this stuff, who tempted you? And Eve, Adam goes first. He says, well, the woman you gave me, it's her fault. And what did Eve do? It's the serpent's fault. It's his fault. What do? It's my circumstances. I just can't do anything about it. That's just the way things are. And you know what, God? I can't do anything about it. And if it's not it's the fault of our circumstances, it becomes the fault of our parents, our brother or sister, the coach, the teacher, the principal, the friends, the pastor, the slave-driving boss who just won't leave you alone. It's all his fault, her fault. It's my genetic code's fault. It's never just me. It's always something else. Always something else. It's the culture in which I live. I'm just a victim. But you see what happens as a result because of this attitude that I share with you a lot of times. The temptation is to say, okay, this is a problem of externals, okay? All these things around me, that's what's really wrong. It has nothing to do with me. And so like every problem, what do? We come up with human solutions for them. And these are three basic ones that you typically come across. The first temptation is to fix, okay? The problem is all the stuff around me, so all I got to do is fix it. If you've ever watched Star Trek before, some of you I'm sure probably avoid it like the plague. But Star Trek, the premise of the show is that the Starship Enterprise can go out and seek new worlds and new civilizations. Why? Because Earth has become a utopia. They figured out how to set all the pieces in the right order, and now that Earth is good, now we can go out and explore the worlds. And then we go out to other worlds and we discover that they're hot messes too. Fox just put on a new show called Utopia, if you heard about that. It's a reality show. People are being stuck on an island, and the premise behind the show is they're going to be on this island for a year, and they're going to come up with their own government organization. They get to come up with it themselves, whatever. They're going to decide what religion they're going to follow, all these other things, and they're going to create the perfect civilization. Anybody hold their breath? Sounds like just more motivated by creating drama to me. Politicians push this type of agenda as well. You get the sense that, that our government, if it puts all the things in the right order, our society will be perfect. The United States is here to make everything perfect in the world. Now don't get me wrong, okay? Now we should seek to go after evil and to right wrongs, okay? These are absolutely true things. But the Bible doesn't teach us that we have the solution for sin. And the minute that you or I begin to believe that we do, we're running into problems. And so that's what leads to number two. A lot of times we discover that we aren't in control. We don't have the solution. We don't have the solution to sin, so we deny or avoid. And what this means is if I've experienced a trauma in my life, what do? I dive headfirst into more sinful behavior to avoid. Drugs, alcohol, maybe I just live through my children, whatever it is. I focus on that one thing, and if that one thing is absolutely perfect, then everything else will be good, right? No, what you discover is while you're focusing on that one thing, everything else is falling apart. And number three, we accept sin or this brokenness as just a part of life. And it's really kind of fatalistic. The idea is that there's nothing we can do about it, so it's just going to always be there. Now, as Christians, we believe that sin is a part of life. Absolutely. It's part of who we are right now, okay? But we also believe that there's hope, and that's why we turn to Jesus. And Jesus teaches us a thing or two about sin. And he helps us to understand that sin is a disease. We have a disease. We look at Adam and Eve and we think, okay, that was the first sin, taking the fruit. And so sin is all this outward stuff that we do that we're not proud of. So if we fix all of that, then sin doesn't exist. Jesus says, Sin is something that happens deep inside. He says our hearts are infected. So when Satan looked at Adam and Eve and said, did God really say? What was really happening was he was appealing to their hearts that were turned toward God. And when they reached for the fruit, it wasn't that action that was ultimately the first sin. It was really their hearts, which turned away from God and said, guess what? Guess who matters most? I do. I'm in charge now. God, you're out. I'm in the middle. In Matthew chapter 15, Jesus talks about this. He says, out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. The things that we do are indicative of what's going on in here. And even if you're not doing anything wrong, there's still a problem. What this teaches us is that while it's good to work against evil, to try to do good things, it's not going to fix what's inside. We can't open ourselves up and take sin out. And that's why it's important for us to look to the Bible and recognize that only Christ offers the cure. God has given the cure. This is a place for people who have that disease. Christ is the cure. I was reading the Jesus Storybook Bible to my sons in the last couple weeks. I started reading that to them. At the the very beginning, it's a beautiful storybook, Bible parents, if you've never opened it up before. But at the very beginning, it talks about the Bible. And it says, oftentimes the Bible is thought of as a story about a bunch of people who do good things, or a bunch of heroes. And said, actually, the Bible's full of a bunch of people who are always doing things, oftentimes doing things they shouldn't, and quite frequently doing it on purpose. There's only one perfect, true hero of the Bible, and that's Jesus. And every story whispers his name. Since the fall, the Bible chronicles repeatedly, over and over and over, people who are self-centered. It's all about me, God. It's all about me. And what do? We hurt one another. We do hurt. We kill one another. We actively engage in sin. We indulge that sinful part of ourselves. And how does God treat us in response? This is what's amazing. He turns to you and me and says, I love you. I love you despite that broken part of you. And I will be here for you whenever you're ready to listen. And ultimately, that's why Jesus is at the core. Jesus was born without a heart that was broken. He was everything that we were created to be but couldn't be. He encountered broken, diseased people who hated one another. In fact, he encountered broken, diseased people who hated him. Satan approached Jesus and did the same thing he does to us. Did God really say that you should climb on that cross? Is that the solution? Did God really say that this world isn't your playground? Jesus, you got this whole world. And Jesus' response was yes, God did say those things. There's one solution. And I love them. I love you. I love all these people too much to give in to you. And so Jesus climbed on the cross and died and paid the price and gave us the cure for that disease. And as a family, what we do is we gather around that simple truth of grace, of unconditional love of Jesus. And it's here that when you begin to see one another as family, you begin to see how that message of grace encounters your life, your life, your life, your life. And we grow together in understanding how powerful that is. You feel like you're the only parent in this room who doesn't have it together with your children. Well, guess what? I'm with you on that at times. There's others in this room who feel just that way. Are you a young adult, teenager who feels like, that you're the only one who struggles doing the right thing? Well, guess what? There's plenty others in here, and oftentimes it's just a case where we're afraid to share it with one another. Are you tired of seeing people do obnoxious things to one another? Sometimes within our own community, I am too, but guess what? That's why we remember that we are all diseased sinners, and there is one thing that draws us together, and that is the grace of Jesus. And there are times when we need to offer one another that grace in response.